And there's a second. All in favor, vote aye. All right.
13 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. Senator McClellan. Last two, and I think yours are pretty pretty straightforward, and yeah, it's fine.
The first one is Senate Bill 291 that just codifies existing budget language from the 2017 budget that authorized DMV to create the electronic titling and registration programs, including the online dealer program and the electronic lien program. I think the idea is just by codifying them, it gives participants a place in the code to look for them. And I have the commissioner here who can answer any questions.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. We're just codifying what's in the budget from last year. All right, it's been a motion and a second that we report Senate Bill 291. All in favor, vote aye on electronic voting board.
Thirteen ayes, 0 nays.
13-0. 359.
All right, 359, under current law, the DMV Commissioner may waive driver instructor training programs for former state police officers who wish to teach driver's education, but only former state police officers. What this bill would do is allow the DMV Commissioner to waive such requirements for a former local police officer who would have qualifications to teach driver's ed. I believe
I have an amendment if you're acceptable, just to make sure they have the training in the traffic, because a lot of other agencies do initially a couple of years, and then they go into the criminal investigation side and don't operate in that field very often.
In concept, I am do support your amendments. I do have, this was requested by a constituent who's a former police officer from Henrico. I think he had a suggestion to your amendment. So I don't know if you want to hear from him.
I think council shared that. I'm fine with that. I just want to know that they have a background before we waive any qualifications.
Okay.
If you'll report that amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 61, after service, insert as a traffic enforcement officer with patrol experience.
Yep.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Marsden.
question for patron. I've never quite gotten the nexus between being a former police officer and being able to teach people how to drive. I understand they're good drivers. I understand they know the rules of the road. But in terms of teaching kids and knowing how to do that, isn't some of the instruction that goes on, involve how to teach and how to handle people as opposed to just knowing the rules?
Well, this is all permissive, so the DMV Commissioner can put whatever parameters around that authorization that he wants. And my understanding is there's been no problem with the way the law works currently with former state police officers who, as you pointed out, who have enforced the traffic laws and therefore understand them. And so, but it's kind of arbitrary to say a former police officer could have the ability to teach, but a former local police officer couldn't. So all this is doing is, so long as they have the appropriate training and the DMV Commissioner is comfortable that they have the ability to teach the class, the Commissioner can give them the authority to teach.
I can give you a little history, and this may date me back, but 33 years ago when I began to work for the state police, we taught driver's education. We were the ones, instead of the teachers, that taught it. And then as the years progressed and the demands got higher for law enforcement, the teachers began to be certified within the school system to teach that program. But we would go in occasionally and teach a part of the DMV class. So over the years, it's kind of changed to just in the classroom with a certified teacher through DMV to do it and taking the law enforcement out of the aspect of it. But the majority of us that taught that went through instructor school. I was an instructor at the academy. I instructed at the school. So we had the teaching qualifications and the expertise in that field. And that's one of the reasons I thought it was important to have some kind of an amendment that individual had that experience in traffic safety in order to teach it. But for years, we were the ones that taught that program.
Mr. Chairman, so if I could, so a police officer hasn't gone through any training on how to teach it, and
I don't think DMV would let them
do that. But does DMV have any parameters around what instructors must, what kind of knowledge they should have if they've been certified as instructors, pass some kind of a test or whatever, or just being a police officer with traffic experience qualifies you?
I think that you have the reins to say who the instructor is and what their qualifications are.
We do, sir, and I'm Sharon Brown from Department of Motor Vehicles. And there are, right now, for a driver to be trained, excuse me, to teach at one of the driver training schools, they go to community college, and there's 2 courses that they need to take.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, prior to, and just to follow up with that, prior to you teaching a driver's education course, you had to complete a instructor's course with the department and be able to articulate your ability to teach before you could ever go into the school and do that. So, Senator Cosgrove.
Mr. Chairman, just kind of expanding on Senator Morrison's question, if I'm going to be taking combat flight training, the last thing I want is somebody that just has a degree and hasn't been in combat flight himself. Basically, police officers, especially patrol officers, have seen things that no classroom teacher have ever seen or will ever see. They've seen it all. They bring a unique perspective into the classroom. Now, I understand there's the question of can they actually teach, but with DMV having reins over, what they can do, I think this bill makes all kinds of sense, and I think that they will be the best driving instructors that will be in the school system. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have someone that wants to speak?
I think this is Park Slater who requested it. I think if you have any further questions to Senator Morrison's point,
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Morrison, to your point, I'm a retired police sergeant from Henrico County, retired with 32 years service. To your point, I agree with you that just because that you're a law enforcement officer doesn't necessarily mean that. My proposal in this bill would pretty much leave what is there intact. But for those other law enforcement officers, local officers like myself, we have been DCJS certified as general instructors to learn how to teach, to your point, which is well taken. And also beyond that, to be EVOC instructors, emergency vehicle instructors. And there's a little bit of a misnomer in that fast driving, emergency driving is a small part, because it is, I'm sure that the chair can attest to as well, most police vehicle accidents occur in parking lots, backing up, or at low speeds and not at high speeds. So the crux of that is driver education, being able to correct bad habits, being able to identify one of the things in particular. One of the leading causes of teenage fatalities is rollovers from overcorrection after running off the road. We teach that, and being able to, over the years, I've been teaching driving, taught driving in a police venue for over 20 years. Being able to take that post-career and impart that information to young drivers is what I hope this bill will enable us to do. But I agree with your point that there needs to be some kind of qualification.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mindy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mindy Carlin. I represent iDriveSmart, which is actually a private sector driver's education company that was started by a retired police officer. All of his instructors are either current or retired police officers. They do go through all of the required training in getting those courses at community college system. We now can get that through not for credit as well as for credit due to some legislation that you passed a few years ago. But we did not ask for this legislation, but we absolutely support it and definitely support that nexus between police officers and law enforcement and teaching our kids, and Senator Cosgrove's point that there really is no better person to teach our kids about driver safety. So I urge your support for the bill. Thank you.
Great. Move and second that we report the bill as amended. All in favor, vote aye on electronic voting bill. Start my own. I drive fast.
13 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, that completes our docket for today. I think we're on schedule to try to get 19 to 20 bills out so we can finish our docket. We've done very good so far. We've limited ourselves to bills that we carry over, so if we can continue this pace, we'll get done and not have to have an extra meeting. So thank everybody for your